There's a lot of me in Max Wolf. I always liked the relationship that Ian Fleming had with James Bond. When 007 is talking about women or alcohol or Jamaica or patriotism, you can hear Fleming's voice, and yet James Bond is his own man. There's a part of him that's got nothing to do with Ian Fleming. And I tried to have that relationship with Max Wolf. He's like a shadow brother. He's 50% me and 50% his own man. There's other characters that I've written throughout the years, such as the protagonist in Man and Boy, which is very much like me. It's very much based on me, but it's based on a specific time in my life when my parents were dying, and specifically when my mum was dying of cancer. And so that represents me at a certain time in my life, and I'm not like that anymore. I'm a different man. We're changing, we're constantly changing as men. And even if you base a character 100% on yourself and your own experiences, 10 years later, you're somebody else. My policy with reviews is that you should never run away from them. You should never avoid them. So if I pick up a newspaper or if I'm on a website and there's a review of one of my books, then I'll read it and I'll enjoy it if it says nice things, and I'll suck it up and take my lumps if it isn't. But I don't get out of my way to read reviews because it can be destructive. I think if you have a career that lasts for a long time, if you have a career that lasts for 30, 40, 50 years, then you have to develop protective mechanisms. And one of the ways that you do that is not listening to what other people say, whether it's good stuff or bad stuff. It shouldn't matter too much to you. So I don't go out of my way to read reviews, but I don't run away from them. And of course it's changed these days because reviews are everywhere. Everybody's a critic these days. So you know, what some little geezer thinks in the Sunday Times doesn't matter quite as much as it did 20 years ago. My worst vice is that I'm never satisfied. My worst vice is that I'm never truly happy, even in moments of glory and triumph. I'm thinking it could be a bit better. It could be a bit better than this. It could, you know, when The Murder Bag came out, it went to #1, but it was only #1 for 1 week. And it was a great moment. It was a wonderful moment to see that book that I'd written without a contract, used all my life savings to fund writing it, invested in myself. And, you know, it was proof that I could do it when it went to #1, but it only stayed there for 1 week. And I wanted to stay there, well, preferably forever, really. And I think that it's a great blessing when you can realise the moments that you're happy. And it's a great blessing when you can realise the moments that you're truly content. And if I've got a problem, if I've got a vice, I think I don't stop and appreciate those moments. I'm looking down the line. But I think that a lot of people that have success, I think probably anybody that has any kind of success in their chosen profession is a bit like that it wears off the feel-good feeling, wears off very quickly. I think that the last truly great band were the Stone Roses. They were the last band that was up there with anybody and everybody that you can care to mention, because the Stone Roses broke down barriers. They broke down all sorts of barriers between dance music and rock music that nobody had really done before. And if you look at the real greats, the real immortals like Prince and Elvis and Bowie, they all did that. They all had that quality. And Stone Roses, tragically for me, broke up after just one album. So I don't really wish that they'd get back together because the moment has gone, you know. But I wish that they'd stayed together. I wish they'd stayed together, and I wish they hadn't broken up the band. It's the greatest thing any young musician can do is learn to keep the band together. When I was 10 years old, I went out to a garage in Billericay in the little Pebble Dash semi-detached suburban house that I grew up in. And on the back seat of my dad's car, I don't know, I was getting like a football or a fishing rod or something. And on the back seat of my dad's car there was a handgun. And my dad had been a big war hero. He was in the Royal Naval Commandos. He won the Distinguished Service Medal. He was a big war hero, but he was a greengrocer. He was a working class man. He was a greengrocer. And yet this handgun was on the back of his car. And I wasn't sophisticated enough and old enough really to confront him about it. But I was too old to just blurt out what I'd found. And I've had absolutely no idea to this day. We never spoke about it. I have no idea why my dad had a handgun. It was like a 45, like a revolver, on the back seat of his car. I don't know if he was looking after it for someone. I don't know if he had this private life that I knew nothing about. But it made me think that you never really know another person, and even if you think you do. And it made me realise that my father, although I thought I knew him very well, he had this hinterland that I knew nothing about. And that mystery, that central mystery of my childhood, what my dad was doing with this handgun on the back of his car, haunts me still. When I started in the music press, it was the late 70s, and that was probably the most liberated, free, wildish generation there's ever been. The world was post-pill and pre-AIDS. And we were absolutely certain if there were two things that were never going to kill you, it was sex and drugs. We were that generation. And when I was in the music business, drugs were absolutely everywhere. And they were at breakfast. They were at editorial meetings. They were just absolutely, they were on the road. They were in the office. And I imagine that in the office of the NME, there may have been one or two people that didn't take drugs, but they were very few and far between. And these were, the people that I worked with were hardcore drug users. They didn't, the guy that took heroin with Keith Richards. The guy that loved reggae and smoked his spliff with Bob Marley. And so they were kind of serious drug users. And I took a lot of drugs myself in those few years that I was there. And I think that they're a dead end. I think that drugs are a dead end. I'd lost most of my closest friends either killed themselves or wrecked their lives, ruined themselves with drugs. But we're all a product of our time, and I was a product of the time when sex and drugs and rock and roll were at their absolute apex. I think in the 60s, it was 200 people in Chelsea. And in the late 70s, it was everybody. It was everybody that was young. So I was around a lot of drugs. I did a lot of drugs, and said goodbye to a lot of people that I loved and think of to this very day, and wish they were still around, because it's great now. It's great now. It's a great time. It's a great time to be alive. But yeah, I was into drugs when everybody was into drugs. The recurring dream that I've had in my life, it came back to me maybe a dozen times. I was in a burning wasteland. It was somewhere like a sub-Saharan desert and Mars. It was that kind of emptiness, that burning heat. And I had a shape. The recurring dream that I've had in my life, it came back to me maybe a dozen times. I was in a burning wasteland. It was somewhere like a sub-Saharan desert and Mars. It was that kind of emptiness, that burning heat. And I had a shaven head, and I was forever stumbling forward, but not quite falling, and aware that I was going to burn if I fell. And in my 20s and early 30s, I had this dream, every 6 months or so. It kept coming back. Strange. The only dream that I ever had that was recurring. And it's slipped away from me. And I think what it is as you get older, one of the good things about getting older is that there's less stress and there's less anxiety and there's less of a troubled subconscious. And it's curious, but the closer you get to the grave, the calmer you get. So it's something to look forward to, kids. That I could have ended more kindly, and I mean relationships, both professional and personal, where I could have thought a little bit more about the other person's feelings and let them down a bit more gently. And I mean, I'm talking about whether they were my accountant or my girlfriend. I just could have, or my agent. I just could have done it with a little bit more kindness. And I've had pangs of regret when I think of some people that I've dropped, to use the correct terminology. I could have done it with a little bit more sensitivity, but I wouldn't actually. I'm not big on apologies. Move on. Suck it up. But I confess that I do feel there's a few people that I let go of that I could have done it with more gently. The best life tip that I ever got is that when you get back from the gym, the first thing you should immediately do is pack your kit bag again for the next time, because then that psychologically it's very powerful, because it tells your subconscious that this is never ending, that this staying fit and being healthy and sucking as much juice out of life as you possibly can, it doesn't end. You haven't done it. Just because you've been in the gym for 90 minutes doesn't mean that it's done. It's never done. It never ends. And so the best tip that I ever got was, as soon as you get home, pack your bag for the next time. And that was given to me by the guy who's been my personal trainer for the last 14 years, called Fred Kindle, who runs Fred's Gym. And Fred gave me that tip, and he's kind of my Yoda figure, really. He's kind of guided me to the path of wisdom. But you should always do that. As soon as you get home from the gym, you should pack, and then you'll be the best you can be, as fittest you can be, the healthiest you can be. I think the secret of life is more life. The impulse to live is greater than anything. So I would, have absolutely no problem eating human flesh. You wouldn't, under pain of death. I think if that was the only option for a little bit more life, then I'd do it. But gently sautéed with a little bit of garlic. A few years ago, my career looked like it was coming to an end. My newspaper column was dying after 18 years, because the newspaper that I worked with, they got this new editor who didn't really want to pay any money to anyone. So that was coming to an end. And the success I'd had after Man and Boy was kind of running down. So it looked like my novel writing career was also coming to an end. So I talked about it with my wife, Eureka, and decided that I'd like to write a series of thrillers. I'd like to write a crime series. I'd like to have a crack at that. And but it would mean funding it myself. It would mean cashing in my life savings. It would mean risking our house and our lifestyle for the sake of writing a book without a contract, with absolutely no guarantee that anything would happen. I'd make 50p out of it. And you never know. You never know. You can never, I was quite a cocky young man, but you get the cockiness knocked out of you as life goes on. And I know there are no guarantees. And I knew it had to be good. So I took a couple of years to write this book. And then we sold it within 24 hours. And then I got a call from my editor telling me that it was going to be #1 in the Sunday Times hardback bestseller list that Sunday. And that was an enormous relief, because when you can take chances when you're young. You can take chances with drugs, you can take chances with sex, you can take chances with your career. But as you get older and there are people relying on you, and they're relying on you to do the right thing, it becomes much more nerve-wracking. And I wasn't certain that I'd done the right thing by writing this book, The Murder Bag, the first Max Wolf book. So to get that, although, we all want our books to be read, we want our books to be successful, but this was more than that. This was like a validation of rolling those dice, which sometimes a man has to do. And a woman too, of course. Everybody's got to roll those dice sometimes. I try to believe in God, and I struggle. Increasingly, I struggle. And what I believe is that the newly dead do not go far. I think that I've felt with the death of my parents, with all the friends that I've had that have died, I've felt that they were close at first, and then their presence faded. And I don't know if that was just an echo of love, just an echo of love in my heart for them, or if it was something more. And I do suspect that it was something more, that there's a spirit that lingers, and then it fades. But if it fades to nothing or some afterlife, I don't know.